What happens when the quietest streets hide the darkest secrets? When the trusted neighbor, the local priest, or the school teacher turns out to be part of a network feeding on human lives? Ohio awoke to that nightmare in September 2025. Under the cool autumn sun, a line of unmarked SUVs rolled through suburban cul-de-sacs, past trimmed lawns, and white picket fences toward addresses that looked like any other. Behind those doors lay evidence of one of the largest human trafficking networks in the state's history, and a truth no community wanted to face. Operation Next Door was not just another police sting, it was a moral mirror held up to the nation. Launched under Attorney General Dave Yost and the Organized Crime Investigations Commission, it mobilized more than 100 agencies statewide. From Cleveland to Toledo, from Akron to Columbus, officers worked through encrypted chats, digital traps, and carefully staged encounters. The result: 135 arrests, including a priest, a teacher, and even a defense attorney, sent shockwaves through every layer of society. Authorities called it a breakthrough in the war against exploitation, yet beneath the numbers lies something more disturbing: how ordinary the predators appeared. Some were parents, others professionals, all lived among their victims' families, a chilling reminder that modern slavery thrives not in darkness, but in daylight. The operation's name Next Door wasn't symbolic, it was literal. Officials chose it to highlight how trafficking has migrated from distant criminal underworlds to middle-class suburbs. Intelligence files show predators now use encrypted online forums, fake job offers, and escort listings to trap victims, especially minors. Reuters' recent reports confirm similar trends nationwide, with trafficking rings adapting faster than ever through AI-driven anonymity and cryptocurrency payments. The sting's timing also carried political weight. Under President Donald Trump's renewed Homeland Safeguard Directive, federal and state authorities intensified efforts to dismantle domestic trafficking networks. Trump's policy, described by BBC analysts as zero tolerance on domestic exploitation, pushed states to coordinate unprecedented cross-agency crackdowns. For Ohio, it meant combining state troopers, FBI cyber units, and local task forces in real-time collaboration. But the operation's resonance goes beyond law enforcement. It cuts into America's ongoing struggle between security and civil liberty. Each arrest, each raid, each digital trace raises questions about privacy surveillance and the expanding reach of the state in the name of protection. DW's European commentators noted the parallels with Germany's own digital monitoring laws, warning that democracies must tread carefully between vigilance and intrusion. Globally, the Ohio sting echoes broader conflicts not on battlefields, but in principle. In Ukraine, where children have been trafficked across war zones. In Iran, where economic collapse fuels black markets and forced labor. And in China, where the line between surveillance and social control blurs daily. America's actions at home become part of that same moral equation: how to defend freedom without sacrificing it. In the end, Operation Next Door revealed more than criminals. It exposed the silent complicity of indifference. The line between neighbor and predator has never been thinner. So the question remains: in a world where evil hides in plain sight, how far should a nation go to keep its own people safe? The scale of the operation was staggering. More than 100 law enforcement agencies, local police, state troopers, FBI cyber units, and federal task forces coordinated under a single command structure. It was one of the largest anti-trafficking campaigns in U.S. history, planned for over a year under the codename Next Door. By dawn on September 14, 2025, synchronized raids began across 12 Ohio counties. Streets that once echoed with morning joggers were now filled with flashing lights and tactical vehicles. In total, 135 individuals were arrested. Among them, 103 were charged with attempting to purchase sex, including with minors. Another 32 faced felony counts from pandering obscenity involving children to possession of child sexual abuse material. Reuters described the operation as an unprecedented domestic strike on human trafficking at community level, but the numbers told only part of the story. Behind those arrests was an intelligence network built on precision. Analysts at Ohio's Organized Crime Investigations Commission traced digital footprints through dating apps, online classifieds, and encrypted chat rooms. The data was staggering: hundreds of thousands of messages, each analyzed by AI-assisted systems developed in partnership with Homeland Security. According to Defense News, similar digital infiltration techniques were recently deployed in anti-cartel operations along the US-Mexico border, demonstrating a growing fusion of counter-terror and anti-trafficking technology. Attorney General Dave Yost called the effort a war fought in living rooms and inboxes. His words weren't rhetorical. Investigators used decoy accounts posing as minors, triggering waves of illicit offers within hours. In one case, a registered sex offender drove 120 miles to meet what he thought was a 15-year-old, only to meet undercover agents. Such operations expose the blurred boundaries between local crime and global exploitation. The BBC recently reported on cross-border trafficking pipelines stretching from Southeast Asia to Europe and now increasingly into North America. American officials believe many of the arrested suspects were linked indirectly to international dark web exchanges that trade in illegal material sourced from conflict zones. The logistics of Operation Next Door were almost military in nature. Like battlefield coordination, every move required secrecy and precision. Command centers in Columbus and Cleveland coordinated real-time drone surveillance, license plate tracking, and live feed monitoring from tactical units. Jane's Defense Weekly noted that this level of coordination mirrors NATO's urban counterterrorism doctrine, where technology, speed, and multi-agency communication define victory. But with such power comes scrutiny. Civil liberties groups questioned whether sting operations risk entrapment or excessive surveillance. Yost responded that every operation was authorized under strict judicial oversight with digital warrants and ethical boundaries. Yet the tension remains: how far can law enforcement go before public protection turns into public monitoring? The arrests shook the state's self-image. Small towns that once prided themselves on safety found themselves in headlines for the wrong reasons. Churches, schools, and law firms faced painful reckonings. Al Jazeera reported how similar stings in the Middle East have forced communities to confront taboo subjects where shame often shields predators more than it protects victims. Ohio's case now forced America to look inward to confront the hidden epidemic thriving behind closed doors. The shockwaves didn't stop at state borders. The Guardian compared Operation Next Door to the UK's Operation Stovewood, which exposed systemic abuse across multiple cities. In both cases, the revelation was identical. Predators weren't outsiders. They were insiders, respected, trusted, often admired. As the raids ended and mugshots filled evening broadcasts, a haunting silence followed. Communities struggled to reconcile the faces of offenders with the people they once greeted every morning. And that silence leads to a deeper question: if the threat truly lives next door, what does safety even mean anymore? The mugshots stunned the nation. A priest, a teacher, a defense attorney, a former police officer, faces once associated with guidance, justice, and faith, now bound by chains and accusation. Operation Next Door shattered the illusion that human trafficking is confined to alleyways or distant criminal circles. It proved that predators can wear the robes of clergy, the badges of law, and the smiles of neighbors. Among those arrested was a 76-year-old Greek Orthodox priest. Once entrusted with moral authority, he now faced solicitation charges that prosecutors said undermined every value he preached. Another, a Cleveland Heights school teacher, stood accused of engaging in online exchanges with what he thought was a minor. A defense lawyer and an ex-police officer were also caught symbols of how even the pillars of justice can rot from within. Reuters and BBC reports highlighted the case as a devastating portrait of hypocrisy within America's social institutions. For investigators, the diversity of suspects was both revealing and alarming. Some were wealthy professionals, others unemployed. Several were registered sex offenders who had already served sentences yet returned to predatory behavior. The pattern reflected what DW analysts called a democratic disease exploitation cutting across class, profession, and ideology. Law enforcement officials were blunt. Evil doesn't always wear a mask, Attorney General Yost said during a press conference. Sometimes it wears a tie, a collar, or a teacher's badge. His words resonated far beyond Ohio, sparking national debate about trust power and moral decay. Defense News connected the scandal to broader issues of institutional accountability. In the military and intelligence sectors, background checks and psychological screening have long been vital to prevent insider threats. Civilian life, however, remains vulnerable to what analysts now call moral infiltration individuals who exploit authority to gain access to victims. International parallels are equally unsettling. In Ukraine, amid wartime chaos, investigations revealed exploitation rings targeting displaced women and children, predators disguised as aid volunteers. In Iran, underground networks profit from economic desperation, selling women into forced labor under the guise of employment. And in China, reports from The Guardian show how digital surveillance meant to protect citizens can also hide abuses by powerful local actors. The global message is consistent: when power meets secrecy, exploitation thrives. In the US, Trump's administration has elevated anti-trafficking enforcement to a national security issue. The Department of Homeland Security now treats human trafficking as a threat to domestic integrity, linking it to organized crime and cyber exploitation. Al Jazeera analysts note this mirrors counterterrorism strategies, a recognition that trafficking like terrorism destabilizes societies from within. But with exposure comes a cultural reckoning. Churches issued apologies, school boards launched internal reviews, communities whispered about betrayal. The realization cut deep trust once broken infects everything around it. Yet amid the outrage, one truth stands clear. Operation Next Door didn't just capture criminals, it revealed how exploitation hides behind everyday normalcy. The offenders were not shadows in alleyways, they were fixtures of daily life, walking the same sidewalks, attending the same schools, praying in the same pews. This blurring of good and evil challenges not just law enforcement, but the collective conscience. Because if authority itself becomes a mask for crime, who can be trusted to protect the vulnerable? And more crucially, how does a society rebuild faith when the very guardians of morality stand accused? Behind every arrest number lies a name, a face, and a story. While the headlines focused on the 135 suspects, the true heart of Operation Next Door beats within the lives it saved. Among the survivors was a 14-year-old girl found in Northeast Ohio, rescued from a predator's home after days of being trapped. Another, a 17-year-old missing from Cleveland, was discovered living with a registered sex offender. In total, 67 potential victims were recovered. Each case peeled back another layer of a system thriving on vulnerability and silence. When agents entered those homes, they found more than evidence. They found signs of fear, locked rooms, hidden phones, lists of rules taped to walls. According to the Guardian's social justice correspondents, many victims had been lured online, promised safety or work only to be turned into commodities. Some were adults with developmental disabilities targeted because they couldn't easily report abuse. Others were runaways, trapped by debt coercion or simple manipulation. In one chilling case reported by Reuters, investigators discovered a girl's social media account managed remotely by her trafficker, every photo, every message scripted to conceal her captivity. The sophistication mirrored patterns seen in Ukraine's conflict zones, where displaced minors have been digitally exploited by transnational networks. The US, though far from the front lines of war, faces a similar moral battlefield, predators using technology as a weapon of control. Operation Next Door didn't just arrest offenders, it built lifelines. Survivors were immediately connected to trauma-informed care, counseling, medical treatment, and legal advocacy. Nonprofits and federal partners worked together under Trump's Homeland Safeguard Initiative, which now mandates long-term rehabilitation programs for trafficking victims. DW highlighted this shift as a rare instance where security policy and humanitarian action intersect effectively. Still, recovery is slow. Victims must rebuild not only their safety, but their sense of self. Rescue is only the first step, said one advocate from the Cleveland Human Rights Coalition. The real challenge is helping survivors believe the world beyond the door isn't just another trap. The emotional scars stretch beyond Ohio. Al Jazeera's recent coverage on the Middle East's trafficking crisis draws eerie parallels. In both cases, victims are treated as currency in invisible economies. From forced labor camps near Tehran to online exploitation rings in the US, the pattern is identical power preying on desperation. Globally, this epidemic tests the meaning of freedom itself. As the West condemns foreign regimes for human rights violations, the Ohio operation reminds Americans that enslavement can exist even in the heart of democracy. Trump, addressing reporters at the White House, called the sting a wake-up call for every state. His statement, echoed by NATO's Human Security Division, framed trafficking not as a local crime, but as a threat to Western stability, undermining trust, eroding moral authority, and enabling organized networks that transcend borders. The stories of those rescued now form the moral spine of the investigation. Prosecutors say survivor testimony will be key to securing convictions and to pushing new legislation tightening digital platform responsibility. But beyond the courts, these young lives symbolize something larger, a society's ability to fight for its most vulnerable. Each face, each story demands that the public remember this was not just a criminal operation, but a humanitarian rescue. So as the survivors begin to heal, one question lingers: will America's compassion prove as enduring as its outrage? The evidence told its own story, one of scale, sophistication, and method. Across Cleveland, Toledo, and Akron, investigators executed 9 simultaneous search warrants that unearthed an ecosystem of exploitation hidden behind legitimate business fronts. Massage parlors, private offices, apartments with soundproofed walls. What seemed ordinary on the outside concealed operations worth tens of thousands of dollars. Inside, officers seized over $62,000 in cash, hundreds of mobile devices, encrypted drives, and computers stacked with illicit data. The Guardian described the evidence as a digital crime scene frozen in time. Forensic teams began the painstaking work of decrypting files, uncovering messages, and tracing blockchain payments tied to online solicitation. According to Reuters, at least a dozen suspects were found to have transferred funds through cryptocurrency wallets linked to international trafficking networks. But the most revealing discovery came from the servers themselves. Investigators found coordinated exchanges of explicit material digital currencies traded for live-streamed abuse sessions, a grim reminder that trafficking today operates as both a physical and cyber crime. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the operation's scope to NATO cyber defense maneuvers, calling it a hybrid threat model blending human exploitation with digital infrastructure. Each recovered phone contained fragments of the web screenshots of conversations, hidden folders, and GPS logs marking pickup locations. The evidence revealed how victims were rotated across state lines and how organized cells communicated through seemingly benign courier apps. These patterns echoed methods observed in transnational smuggling routes from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, documented by DW and Al Jazeera, further proof that America's trafficking problem is not isolated but part of a global network. The analytical challenge was enormous. FBI cyber units backed by Defense Department algorithms applied machine learning models originally designed to predict terrorist financing. Within weeks, agents reconstructed entire trafficking hierarchies, identifying recruiters, enforcers, and digital handlers. This wasn't chaos, said one investigator in a BBC interview. It was business meticulously planned, globally connected, and locally executed. Still, with this success came new ethical dilemmas. The same technologies that broke open these networks AI-based pattern recognition masks, metadata scanning, predictive policing, raised alarms among privacy advocates. Where is the line between surveillance for protection and surveillance as control? It's a question echoing from Washington to Brussels to Beijing. In China, state-run data monitoring has long blurred that boundary. In Europe, the EU's Digital Services Act now enforces stricter oversight of tech companies that fail to prevent trafficking content online. The United States, under Trump's renewed Digital Sovereignty Directive, is moving in a similar direction, demanding accountability from major platforms like Meta and X for failing to detect predatory activity. Reuters analysts note that such policies signal a growing willingness to treat online trafficking as a form of digital terrorism. The recovered evidence will define future prosecutions. Prosecutors aim to build airtight cases not only against individuals, but against the structures that enable exploitation. If successful, these trials could set national precedent for linking physical trafficking to online complicity, a step many experts consider revolutionary. But beyond the courtroom, the seized data holds a darker promise, proof that society's moral collapse can be mapped, time-stamped, and geolocated. It forces an uncomfortable truth that the machinery of exploitation doesn't operate in the shadows anymore. It lives inside the same systems that connect everyone else. As forensic teams comb through the remaining terabytes of evidence, one question reverberates through the corridors of justice. In an age where every secret leaves a digital trace, can humanity still claim ignorance as an excuse? The arrests may have ended, but the reckoning has only begun. Operation Next Door forced America to confront an uncomfortable truth that trafficking is not a foreign plague, but a domestic disease rooted in neighborhoods powered by technology and sustained by silence. What began as a state operation now echoes through the corridors of Congress, the Pentagon, and the international stage. Under President Donald Trump's directive, the Department of Justice and Homeland Security declared human trafficking a Tier 1 domestic threat, placing it alongside terrorism and cyber warfare. The administration's new National Anti-Trafficking Strategy 2025, unveiled just weeks after Ohio's arrest, pledged to unify state databases, strengthen federal penalties, and deploy AI-powered detection systems across major cities. Reuters reported that this initiative marked a shift from reactive policing to predictive deterrence. But with power comes the question of oversight. Civil liberty advocates, including experts cited by The Guardian and DW, warned that the government's expanded surveillance powers could erode privacy and public trust. They argue that the same tools designed to protect might one day be used to watch everyone. The balance between freedom and security, once an abstract debate, now sits at the center of American life. Can a democracy defend its people without compromising the liberties it promises to uphold? Internationally, the ripple effects are undeniable. NATO intelligence chiefs view trafficking as a destabilizing force, not only socially, but strategically. In conflict zones like Ukraine, exploitation has surged amid war displacement, while in Iran, economic collapse has fueled human smuggling rings linked to paramilitary financing. Jane's Defense Weekly reports that these networks often overlap with organized crime groups laundering money through digital exchanges, the same kind of patterns uncovered in Ohio. Meanwhile, the US-China rivalry adds another layer of complexity. Beijing's cyber policies, presented as social stability programs, double as mass monitoring systems capable of preempting dissent and controlling movement. In Washington, officials now debate whether America's moral authority can endure if it adopts similar tools under the banner of safety. The ideological confrontation between liberty and control, freedom and fear, is no longer theoretical. It plays out in every policy, every raid, every encrypted byte of data. For communities in Ohio, the aftermath is both sobering and unifying. Churches have reopened with renewed outreach programs. Schools have introduced digital safety education. Survivor networks now operate statewide, offering care beyond the headlines. Yet beneath this progress lies a fragile understanding that the evil exposed in Operation Next Door may never fully vanish. It evolves just as fast as technology and greed allow. Al Jazeera recently framed this as a war without borders, where the front line runs through every home. The United States now stands as both participant and symbol in that global fight, its actions watched by allies, judged by rivals, and measured against the ideals it claims to protect. Operation Next Door wasn't merely about arrests, it was about accountability. It forced the nation to ask how much complacency, how much denial, and how much privacy it is willing to trade to keep its people safe. Because the real battle isn't just against traffickers, it's against the apathy that lets them exist. And as America tightens its defenses, the haunting question remains: will the country's pursuit of safety safeguard its soul or slowly consume it? In September 2025, Operation Next Door became one of Ohio's largest human trafficking crackdowns, exposing a network of 135 suspects from priests and teachers to attorneys and former police officers. Led by Attorney General Dave Yost, the operation mobilized more than 100 agencies statewide, uncovering evidence of digital exploitation, encrypted payments, and organized trafficking networks operating within suburban America. 67 victims, including minors and adults with disabilities, were rescued and placed in long-term care. The operation's impact reached beyond arrests. It prompted sweeping federal reforms under President Donald Trump's National Anti-Trafficking Strategy 2025, reframing human trafficking as a national security threat. Yet it also reignited the debate over surveillance freedom and moral responsibility in a digitally monitored world. Analysts from Reuters, BBC, and The Guardian called it a defining test of America's conscience. The sting left one question echoing through courts and communities alike: how can a nation defend its people from the darkness within without becoming the very shadow it fears?